Chapter 1. The Idea. Brainstorming the main plot. The movies you see these days and the books you read have a tendency to have intricately woven storylines that intertwine to keep the audience's interest. We're getting more and more difficult to entertain, so writers have to work that much harder on planning out their moves while still engaging the reader. Some writers manage to simply start writing and then winging it through the book. But those writers usually give considerable time to brainstorming, thinking, taking notes, and keeping the idea consistent in their heads. So, how exactly do you brainstorm a plot? Usually, a book begins with an idea. It could be as simple as a phrase you'd like to include in a story, or a conversation you want a couple of characters to have. This is the seed of inspiration that will inspire you to get the ball rolling. Once you get into your writing mindset after that, you'll be able to focus more easily. If you have the plot in your head already and have thought about it for a while, you'll be able to write freely and get your process started with minimal difficulties. I always write down my ideas and go back to them to look at them from a different perspective. That way, if the idea is something completely crazy and imaginative like the dreams I have, I can check it out from another point of view and see if I can build a story around it. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 ideas, phrases, words, scenarios, or dreams to put together a story. I might have one idea one day and 4 days later the next. But if they mesh well, there's a nice little click in my head and things come together nicely. That's not to say that I don't have to work through the details, but a solid idea is what you start from and can build upon. People have all sorts of ways to brainstorm ideas. You can run your idea by someone close to you for a second opinion. You can write it down in a notebook in a mind mapping style. You can write down the main points and expand them in outline format. And you can even just let it fester in your mind until you're ready to write. You can free write until something good comes out. You can combine a couple of different ideas into a plot. You can base the entire story on a character, or you can base the story on a location. No matter which of these techniques you're most comfortable with, you can use some proven methods of brainstorming in order to keep track of the ideas, save the ideas, and combine them into a comprehensive map to follow as you write your novel. Or you can just start writing and see what happens, see where it takes you. Sometimes this works better for people, although I would recommend using at least one of the techniques mentioned here to make sure your work is quality work. For our purposes, we'll be taking a look at outlining, mind mapping, and free writing as tools to get your novel underway. Outlining. We all know what an outline is and how it works from high school. You can apply the same technique to writing a novel, except you'll be outlining something you're excited about instead of that biology paper you wrote in school. An outline is usually set up pretty specifically, with levels of text and subnotes to explain the details of each headline. That would look something like this. Headline 1, subheader, explanation/details. Subheader, explanation/details. Headline 2, subheader, explanation/details, and so on and so forth. You can do this on the computer or by hand. That just depends on what you prefer. When you sit down to create this outline, though, it forces you to think more in-depth about your story and where you want to take it, instead of winging it through the writing process, which is one important aspect of doing some planning. You can make sure you keep your facts straight, remember important aspects of a setting, or make sure you know exactly how events are supposed to unfold to continue making sense. Your topics and headlines can also help keep you focused and on track during the writing process itself. I know that I have a difficult time staying focused at times, which is a big part of the reason why I like to outline each chapter's events and character development before I sit down to write it. Writing a short story is one thing. Writing a novel is something completely different. Even the novella I wrote when I was 19 had a planning period and an outline period. The best thing about an outline is that it can be easily modified, changed, and corrected. If you decide to make a change in your plot or a character after you've written a quarter or even half your book, It becomes tedious work to make those corrections and keep everything consistent throughout. Another aspect that needs to be considered in the planning period is whether you want your novel to be written in first, second, or third-person point of view. It's a good idea to consider each one and jot down the pros and cons of that point of view in relation to your story, so that you can make the best possible decision on which perspective you'll be writing in. Outlining is one of my personal favorite ways to work through my ideas. I tend to do it on the computer, but also often jot down ideas for projects on paper, so that it's more easily accessible and doesn't bog down my system with a ton of unnecessary files. Imagine if you wrote all of your ideas down on the computer in separate documents. It would be overwhelming to look at. Feeling overwhelmed can be a killer of motivation, so we definitely don't want that. That brings me to my next point. An outline allows you to focus and work on one small part of your novel at a time instead of trying to wrap your head around the whole story while you write. That's good news. After all, how do you eat an elephant? Mind mapping. For those of you who haven't heard of this, mind mapping is sort of like outlining, but more visual and less controlled. Mind mapping is better for planning if you have less of an idea about the details of your book and just want to see where your mind takes you. This technique is actually closer to how the brain really works, which makes it simpler and easier to do than an outline. Making a mind map instead of an outline allows you to get those creative juices flowing while keeping things fun and interesting. Begin in the middle of a horizontally oriented sheet of blank paper. This ensures enough space for you to expand on the original idea. It also works well for character development, which I'll be covering more in depth later on in this book. The people who have made a habit of mapping out their ideas, concepts, and problems have found it extremely useful in bettering their lives. Why not use the same technique to better your novel idea? For me, I like this technique to brainstorm because it keeps things simple. It may not look extremely organized, but it is, and since you're the person who created it and used specific words for each concept or idea, you should be able to reinterpret whatever is there without any problem. Once you have your central topic, idea, or concept to expand from, begin linking the main concept to subconcepts. Sometimes it takes a few minutes to develop the subtopics, but that's what brainstorming is all about, accessing ideas and taking them to the next level. Repeat the same process for the subtopics and branch out even further. You can branch out as often as you like or need to in order to get the most out of your ideas. It's a good idea to keep the labels short and to the point. You may also choose to use colorful ink, images, symbols, or a wide range of other things to get the results you want. If you've never done mind mapping before, it may be a good idea to do a test run of the process so you can see what it's like and how the connections are being made in your mind. From there, you can go nuts. And don't worry about messing anything up. This is the brainstorming process, remember? You can change and fix things once you're more familiar with your idea and have it documented in more detail. If you prefer to do mind mapping on the computer using software, that's an awesome option too. There are a number of free apps and programs you can download online that will help you get started with your mind mapping experience. Some of the most popular are FreeMind, XMind, and web-based options like MindMeister and VYM, View Your Mind. No matter which one you end up using, it will be good to get you started, and various different apps have different features and interface designs, so it really depends on what your preferences are. If you're looking into a collaborative mind mapping experience, Mindomo is a good web-based app that allows you to share your work as well as embed it on your website. A nice touch for those using it as a collaborative tool. Mind mapping is a great way to hash out ideas and plan out a novel. Even if you've never done it before, try doing it with something you know a lot about, or something simple so you can get the hang of it. Or just jump right into mapping out your novel. It really doesn't make a difference, but practice makes perfect. Mind mapping, just like writing or meditation, is a practice,